Phil is one of our Renville County own, and Phil's doing some great stuff on his farm for regenerative soil and just overall awesome fun stuff. So please help me in welcome Phil.
Well, good morning, everyone. I have to tell you, it's pretty intimidating to be sandwiched between Matt Tiffany's presentation and what I expect coming from Dr. Lundgren, but I'll do my best. As a 62-year-old who is just beginning with this journey, and I hope to give you a completely different perspective from a smaller operation of 800 acres. And this will be my 44th crop year coming forward, and I'm more excited about our farming operation and agriculture in general than I've been in my entire lifetime. But before that, this needs to be done. I want to say thank you to Holly and her crew, Ethan and Kyle, and to Heidi and her crew, Dean and Jordan, for putting on just a terrific informational day, and also for your general huge support of agriculture. So please help me in showing your appreciation. Okay, I'm not a professional speaker, so I'll do the best I can here. My presentation is regenerative agriculture. Is it more than just a conservation practice? And I hope by the end of this presentation that that you'll see that it is much more than that. I know some of you have been involved and had some background in regenerative agriculture, but there may be a fair amount of what I call newbies like myself here. And I guess I thought the best place to start is the soil itself. And you see a picture here. That's what soil is supposed to look like. As Gabe Brown calls it, chocolate cake. So I thought I'd start the presentation out with soil health principles. Many of you have seen this. You look this up on Google or whatever, you'll see five soil health principles. Just to give you some background. And yes, all the pictures that you see in this presentation are from our farm and they're taken. So they are real. First off is soil armor. Keeping the soil covered, not leaving it exposed to sunlight and pounding rainfall. As you can see, this is from one of our fields here that was planted, a 9-species cover crop mix planted after the harvest of a rye field. Lots of armor there. Minimize soil disturbance. Unlike Matt, our smaller operation, we looked at equipment for the strip till, stuff like that, and just wasn't economical to go that way. So we jumped in head first and went right to no-till. And I'll share that story when we get there. But minimizing soil disturbance. Next one is plant diversity. As you can see, there's lots of diversity. There's actually 9 species in that mix, and we'll be planting corn into that this spring. The fourth one is continual live root or live plant to feed the microbiome in the soil, and we'll talk briefly about that as well. Extremely important, and one of the more important, I think, principles. And then also livestock integration. If you can add livestock to your operation and use that to enhance your soil health, it will speed the process up. We've chosen not to do that as of yet. At my age, I'm not so sure I want to start a livestock operation, but that comes to what we call the 6th soil health principle. And you won't see this one necessarily in books about this, but this came about. I work with a consulting group called Understanding Ag, and this is they added this to their soil health principles and its context. Basically, what is it you're trying to accomplish? What do you want to get done? What's important to you? What size is your operation? What kind of soil do you work with? What kind of equipment do you have? There's lots of different avenues. You're going to see our operation is considerably different than Mr. Tiffany's. So I can't express to you enough that context is probably the most important soil health principle if you're looking at this and moving forward. Getting understanding of what you're trying to accomplish and what resources you have to accomplish that. So our journey to regenerative farming, I'll go way back. Started farming in 1980, just off of some really good years of farming right out of high school. And things were pretty tough during the 80s. It was a real baptism, and you looked for any way that you could to survive into the next year. I think that's kind of what started things off. We tried various different things, and then by 1992 we started no-tilling our soybeans into standing corn stalks in a way to try to cut costs. And as I'll explain, a lot of our soil is relatively marginal. We're along the Minnesota River Bluff, and that was our start. We did also try our hand at rotational grazing through the 1990s. Went down to Mississippi, Alabama, went through some seminars, et cetera, with a neighbor, and we looked at that, and we implemented that for about 7 or 8 years, and I'll get back to that in a moment here. But it was a real learning experience. We probably, along about 15 years ago or so, we got rid of pretty much any deep tillage in our corn ground, and we had access to turkey litter, and we just did some minimum tillage in the fall, late disking, maybe 2 to 3 inches, and then in the spring, hitting it with a harrow or a field cultivator, again, very shallow. But we haven't deep tilled probably in about 15 years. We quit using anhydrous ammonia for reasons of what it does to the soil, and started visiting with some friends of ours. Actually, some of you know them, Grant and Don Breitwright from down by Delhi in Renville Falls, and they actually went to our little country church for about 23 years, and we talk about this, and I thought, yeah, they've got a lot of livestock, they can make use of the cover crops, etc. That's really not for me, but I only wished I would have listened a lot sooner. They finally convinced us to attend one of their soil health academies put on by Understanding Ag at their place, and that was in the summer of 2018. And when they sat in that, and in the first hour, I thought to myself, oh my, I wish I'd have looked at this 15 years ago. Because as they went through the presentation, I remembered back when we'd done the rotation grazing, we were talking about soil health, et cetera, multi-species, and we had planted a multi-species to rotational graze on. And I remember when we tilled that up, because I'd taken on a sales position with Pioneer and just didn't have enough time to deal with that. I remembered back the first 3 or 4 crops that we had behind that pasturing were absolutely phenomenal. We'd never seen yields like that on that light soil before. And when I sat in that Soil Health Academy, the light bulb went on. I said, I get it. So I'll share with you, since the 2018, our journey. You'll see this is the Minnesota River, just to give you some perspective of where we're at south of Sacred Heart. This is the river bluff here. We have land that's on the river bottom. Most of it is along the river bluff, very light and marginal ground, all along trees. Even a couple of the smaller pieces that are a couple miles to the north. We deal with a lot of smaller fields. Some of this is just so you get an idea, it's a wide range. Some of this very heavy, very black, very high pH, high soluble salt ground as well. So I don't buy the excuse, my ground is too black, too heavy to do this. I share this with you because you can see a lot of the ground that we farm, when I share with you yields, etc., is probably not the most desired ground to farm, but it's what we have to work with, and we're grateful for that. So this brings us to where we're at today. This is our current equipment. We got a 16-row, 22-inch corn planter, a 15-foot 750 no-till drill, and a little 15-foot drill for seeding, interseeding cover crops. How did we get there? Well, year one. I'll call it year one. In 2008, fall of 2018, we planted rye into cereal rye into our no-till that we didn't fly it in. I'll talk about reasons why I like to plant this stuff. We no-tilled rye in fall of 2018 into our standing corn stalk. We thought that's the best way to start, or the easiest way to start. And I will say, if you are just taking a look at this, this is probably the least risky crop to start with, and the least risky start. Is we were used to no-tilling soybeans for 30 years. We just added the rye to get a feel for it, and that's what we did. And of course, you see the soybeans here, and then harvesting time, you don't see the corn stalks. And you'll find it, further you get into this, as your soil gets healthier, you'll find that that residue disappears quicker every year. So that was the first year. That fall, we planted rye into our soybean stubble. So we had every acre planted in rye in the fall. And we planted corn for the first time into live rye. I have to tell you, it was a little bit nerve-wracking. And I have an 80-plus-year-old dad, and he was just crapping in his pants because he said, "How is that stuff going to grow out of something like that?" And we planted the rye, planted in the rye. We interseed with a multi-species covers. You can see the germination here coming, and then this is what it looks like into the fall, following the soil principles that I just discussed here a few slides ago. So that fall, we again planted every acre into rye, and we set up our first rye field because we use about 1,200 bushel of rye in our 800-acre operation every year. So we, instead of trying to buy it retail every time, we thought we'd produce it. We've got a lot of marginal soil along trees. We could make use of those acres, and that was the original intent, was to use those acres to provide our own rye seed. And this is one of the fields here, obviously, and then we're harvesting that rye in the fall. I have to admit, first year we're going to have 40 acres, and we kind of tend to do things in 40 to 80 acre increments as we're learning, because it's 5 to 10% of the operation, so we don't have too much risk out front. And we actually originally planted 40 acres of rye along a couple of, all along some fields along the trees. And I was wondering how in the world, because we don't own our own sprayer, we hire the local co-op to do all our, we've chosen not to do that. We've got plenty of other things to do. And wondering how to get those big rigs into these small, little narrow fields. So we actually planted corn into half of it, because I was thinking, how in the world are we going to spray that for weeds? Well, as Matt knows, no weeds grow in this rye. That hasn't been sprayed at all. All it's had is 40 pounds of N in urea, and that's it, along with the 2 bushels of rye that we seeded. So we did that the next year. Then in year 4, 2022, we planted additional acres of rye. We had people asking for rye seed, etc. We wanted to add an additional crop into our operation. And we wanted to try, we've been told multiple times, you'll really appreciate and enjoy even better yields and less cost if you can plant corn into a species, a multi-species cover crop that's been followed from harvested rye. So we thought, well, we're going to give that a try. And you can see some of the cover crop mixes that we have here. This one, actually, we follow soybeans with. This one, we actually follow will be following the corn with. This is a picture about the middle, just actually it was the day of our field day, the day after actually. Took this picture on one of those fields. This is a picture in that same field on mid-December, just before the Christmas snowfall. You can see some of the annuals have been frozen off, but you've got vetch and Sierra rye still green under there, still with a live root, still feeding that microbiome in the soil. And this was just taken here mid-January. Believe me, the deer love it. And this is what they've done. They've dug down 18 inches getting to that cover crop. They're my livestock. And you'll see some pictures later on. But and it's hard to see, but there is actually still green under there, still a live root in that soil. And we're going to be planting corn here now into that mix. This in year 5 for 2023. Actually going to take a look at going with conventional on 40 acres just to try see how that goes with weeds and how we can take care of that with herbicide as well. I just stuck this picture in here. We used a soil health test, Haney soil test, which many of you are well aware of, to kind of see the health of our soil and what we've got for nutrient availability to the plants that we're trying to grow. So, what are the initial successes? Well, this is our equipment lineup that does our fall tillage, our spring tillage, our interseeding, our planting, and application of about 2/3 of the fertilizer we now use on the corn. We definitely reduced our equipment needs. As Matt had talked about, the overhead is significantly reduced. We don't need the horsepower, less passes across the fields. And obviously we've reduced some input needs as well, and I'll share with you more about that. Continued successes. We talked about and you've heard about improved water infiltration and retention. I can't describe that to you. You really have to experience it yourself. It's too hard to explain. You won't believe it until you see it develop on your own farm. Improved soil health. We've seen that happen. We've seen the soil structure just blossom within a couple of 2 or 3 years. To be honest with you, personal thoughts. If you're coming from a straight conventional deep till style operation, it's probably going to take 5 to 7 years, 5 years anyway, to get to the point where we're at. We actually were told by the consultant group Understanding Ag that we actually converted faster than anyone they had ever seen to the soil health that we've attained. And we've actually increased. It's like I said, faster than anything they'd ever seen before, and it has to do with being intentional about what you're doing. We also reduced the soil erosion. These are pictures from actually right at about a year ago. And this is right near our farm on both sides. This is just a mile down the road. Kind of hard to see, but there's an extreme difference between black and white. This here is a tilled soybean stubble field, just a half mile down the road. This is our soybean stubble field with rye seeded underneath. This is a chopped and deep tilled cornfield just a half mile away. This is our corn stubble with standing rye in it. Now I know the first thing you're thinking is, oh man, that's going to take forever to warm up. Matt talked about the differences that you have to think about it, an analogy that Gabe Brown shared with many of us. When you build up that microbiome, you're building up a population. Think of it as when you go to a basketball game in the winter, it's cold out. You got the teams come and you got the scorekeepers show up and it's kind of chilly in the gym. But as you add population to that gymnasium and then pack it full, it can get pretty warm. Same analogy. Again, you won't believe it until you see it on your own farm. Additional successes. Grazing possibilities. Those of you that have livestock, tremendous opportunities. to add and to speed up the process to getting to where you need to be. Habitat for wildlife. This is just 30 head. There's nothing for us to see on a regular basis. And our daughter and son-in-law and my folks we all live in about 3 miles of each other on each of the different farms. There's nothing to see on a given night, 50 to 100 deer out there. In fact, Taylor was just telling me the other night, 2 weeks ago, on a 25-acre field of a multi-species cover crop, there were 180 deer counted out there. And believe me, they can do some damage in the summertime too. But that's our livestock. So those are successes so far. But what about profitability? That's pretty important. Well, these are our numbers here. And I need to explain, like Matt, I used the machinery costs of 2022 Iowa State customer rates and input pricing of what you could purchase these inputs. So we get an even steel look at this. These are our actual what we actually did in 2022. Here, what I did is I talked to a local agronomist. I said, okay, just give me an idea. Again, I don't hold me to these costs. These can go up and down depending upon your operation. You may agree or disagree, that's fine. You have to, in context, you have to apply it to your own operation. But I said, give me an average. What's an average of people do here? In fact, I even compared it with the lender that I used. I said, okay, what do you use for cash flow purposes? Very, very similar to this. The only exception, of course, they had their land costs in there and insurance costs. And one more thing was interest costs. And you'll see that's maybe an advantage to the regenerative ag as well. The fall tillage on the conventional side, $18 Springfield cultivator, pre-herbicide, application, fertilizer. They said this is just an average. They saw pretty much 175, 80, 60, 15, and 2 pounds of zinc, 15 pounds of sulfur, 2 pounds of zinc. Seed triple, post herbicide, application, fungicide, application, harvest, in this amount here. Again, you can agree or disagree with that. You put your own numbers in there. It really is to your own context. Planting rye in the fall versus fall tillage. We use about 75 to 80 pounds. This is a retail price. I mean, rye was pretty high priced last fall. We could reduce that by using our own, but to be fair, I just wanted to use a retail price of the cost of rye. Planting, I actually charged us $2 more because we applied about 50 units of N in UAN, 32% over the top of the row at planting time, so I charged a little more there. We only used a double. For right now, I only feel comfortable because I want other opportunities for weed control if needed yet until we transition to conventional. But with the additional crops, cover crops, and rotation, the need for rootworm is significantly diminished. First post herbicide application, you can see it kind of did this in chronological order, how the season went. What we do is we spray off or terminate the rye and the covers the day of or the day after the corn is planted. Then we interseed. That was the cost of interseed and the planting cost. The second post herbicide, and I've got half because actually we only used the initial herbicide needs on the first pass on half of the operation. The other half, and I'll probably explain a little bit. We had a real challenging spring. Obviously, it was cold. You well know that. We got a third of the corn planted before the 10th of May when we were in a 6-inch rain strip. That really, I mean, I'm panicking. We managed to get on some of the lighter ground, and it shouldn't be fair that it just worked out. We could get a little bit more in on the 16th and 17th of May, but a large share, probably about 40% of the corn, got planted on the 29th of May. And standing rye that was 8 to 10 inches tall, and I'm in sheer panic. Turned out to be one of the best fields we had. Anyway, the bigger the rye is, less weed competition, less need for additional herbicide. That's what I'm getting at there. So only half the acres, so I only went for half the cost. We spread, per the Haney test, we spread some additional units of urea, and actually, when I figured it out, we only used on the entire operation about 30 units, so I'm a little bit high on there. And then the application and harvest. That's $185 an acre difference. Every 100 acres, that's $18,500. And the way I look at that, 650 corn, it equals about, somebody that's doing conventional needs to yield 28 bushels better at 5 1/4 corn, 35 bushels more to be even. Now you've seen the land that we farm, all the deer damage, along the trees where it doesn't yield as much, and there was actually 140 that was some self-inflicted issues. The entire farm averaged 181 bushel on 80 units of N. We haven't applied any P and K since the fall of 2020. Those are numbers, real numbers to us. Beans, similar, same situation. Charge for the corn chopping head, according to the rates, $4 more. And for the life of me, because we've been no-tilling soybeans for 30 years, for the life of me, I've never understood why we chop corn stalks or even till for soybeans. They're a very resilient crop. Spring field cultivator, pre-herbicide, planting, seed, post-herbicide. And again, you can use any numbers, put your own numbers in here. Fungicide, insecticide application, etc. Here we planted rye in the fall, planted no-till the beans. We actually, on our commercial soybeans, we haven't used any seed treatment because as your soil gets healthier, I don't believe you need it. We do raise seed for Pioneer on our acres, on 2/3 of our soybean acres, and that they do require that. One post-herbicide application, generally we found that if we wait a couple of weeks, let the soybeans emerge, we have better weed control when we allow the beans to get emerged and get a little bit further into the growing season. Second post-op and harvest. One thing I want to mention here, corn killer. $6 here, you don't see any here. We actually, 2/3 of our acres again are seed production, and you can't have corn in that sample or it will get rejected. Yet, we don't use a corn killer. We found one corn stalk on this field that I pulled in 350 acres of beans. Why? I'm still learning, but I think a lot of it has to do with the standability of their corn. It's phenomenal. We don't have the breakdown. We don't have the need to buy wind insurance. Our corn is much healthier, and we'll talk about that in a little bit here. But one corn stalk. Difference, 114 acres, $114 an acre. Every 100 acres, $11,400. At $14.50, it's almost 8 bushel. And even at $12, it's over 10.5 bushel. You need conventionally to equal the same. How are our yields? Well, again, I said we raised seed for Pioneer. They grade us on clean out, they grade us on yield. So they compare us to everybody else that raises that same variety that goes to the Jackson production plant. We've been consistently in the upper third of the yield, consistently. So I know we're doing as well as anybody else on significantly less cost. So, and again, I forgot to mention, Holly mentions, if anybody has any questions, just raise your hand. Otherwise, I'll be happy to answer as best I can the questions at the end here. So, if we improve microbial activity, that then improves soil health, which then improves plant, insects, and animal health, which then improves farm environment, whole farm environment, and then improves whole farm profitability. What more could there be? What's the icing on the cake? Yes, those are some grandsons. Two things. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but it's something I want to give you a different look at because I think it's important. And if we don't think this is coming, you better wake up because it's coming. A little background. These plants I got sharing with Holly when she was trying to convince me our family to put on the field day we had at our farm this past September. I shared with her how much healthy our corn was and neighbors. And don't get me wrong, neighbors are great operators. They do a super job. And there's multiple neighbors. But I'd never had an issue with corn stalks going down. It's the plant health. You have to see it to believe it. And she says, and we talked about, because Gabe and them had talked about where this is going with nutrient density of food. And Holly says, well, what if we spaded up some soil out of your farm and go right across the road and dig up some of theirs and let's plant some plants and see what happens. And I thought, oh boy, you're digging up soil. It's just the last thing we need to do. But I didn't say anything. I just went with the flow. And I'm glad we did. I called the neighbor and said, this is what we're going to do. Is this okay? He said, you bet. I'm curious. So we took 5-gallon pails and dug up, spaded up soil out of the two different fields. They probably weren't 50, 75 yards apart, the samples, and planted tomatoes and snap beans in 2 pots for each soil type, for each soil sample. And look at the visual difference in the health. Absolutely nothing was done differently. The rainfall was the same, and Holly, you can share whatever, applied the exact same amount of water. Everything done was exactly the same. Look at the health of those plants. And I can attest to that if you get to this point, you're going to be able to move to a little bit earlier varieties and hybrids, and you'll just as well because they're much healthier and will last much longer. But significant difference, very visual. But look at this. She sent these samples of the snap peas and the tomatoes for a nutrient density test. And we're not talking just 1 or 2%. We are talking 30 and 40% differences. Phenomenal. Why is that important? Second reason, improved human health. Yep, that's our family. In fact, we took that picture a year and a half ago for our 40th wedding anniversary. We've since added yet another grandson. Our 4 daughters and their families are all over this. They've seen the data. There's significant growing amounts of data and research being done on human health and the food that we eat, and the nutrient density of the food and how it's changed in the last 60 or 70 years. In fact, Gabe shares apples that we eat today are 40% less nutrient dense than they were when I grew up as a kid. Huge. Large corporations are taking notes. As friends of mine, I talked about Grant and Don break rates. General Mills has toured their farm, sent the top CEO, top people from the East Coast out for multiple tours on their farm, looking at how they're going to market this because this is going to be demanded by consumers. In 3 to 5 years, and Gabe has seen the prototype. We'll have an app. Consumers will have an app on their phone. They'll be able to walk in the grocery store and check out the nutrient density of the meat, the produce, and anything that's in that store and buy it as such. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but to give you a vision, longer term vision of where this is going. It's way more than just a conservation practice. Okay, 7 final pieces of advice coming from this beginner, because we really are beginners. We're just 5 years into this, and we're more excited about our farming operation and where this is going than we've ever been. First one, open your mind with critical thinking and thicken your skin. You got to think a little bit outside the box. You can't do things like you've done the last 40 years. And yeah, you're going to catch some grief. You're going to raise some eyebrows. You're going to get some snickers. Been there, done that. You see the results we've had. Doesn't bother me a bit. Number 2, change your mind and focus from yield and rate of gain to profit per acre or profit per pound. Isn't that what we pay our bills for? Isn't that what we make our living on? Number 3, I can't stress this enough. Keep it simple. You can see our operation is pretty simple. You can do it at any scale, whether it's the scale of Matt's or the scale of ours. Context. What do you have for resources? What do you have for the land that you run? What do you want to accomplish? Keep it simple. Don't try to do too many things at one time. I've seen too many times where people try to do too many things too fast, and they have no way of measuring. You can see how Matt was measuring things each year as he made the changes. We tried to do the same. Do everything with intention. This is a big one. Guys at Understanding Ag stress this, and I do as well. Do things with a purpose. You're planting your cover crops. I'll back up and say, I'm not being critical of anybody that's spreading their cover crops in the fall to get them planted because of the resources of their time. I prefer to drill it in to get a better stand because I'm trying to be intentional about getting that soil health to where it needs to be quicker. Do things with intention. When the cover crops need to be planted, you plant them. Treat them as if they're your main crop. Number 5, move forward as you feel comfortable and can afford to risk. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. You can see we took our time. We do a small amount each time as we make the changes, trying to get comfortable with it, trying to get used to it, try to understand it, try to see it, and try to grow with it. Number 6, be adaptive and flexible with focused timeliness. As Matt again said, I keep referring to him, he talked about the management to this is more intense. You got to pay attention. You got to be on the spot and get things done when they need to be done in more of a timely fashion than I believe than in a conventional setting. It takes more management. Number 7, observe, observe, observe. I spend more time walking our fields. I believe the exercise is good for me. I spend more time walking our fields than I've ever done in my entire life. Learning, paying attention, so I can make changes as we see fit. Pay attention. I take a spade with me. Pay attention to what's going on under the soil. Pay attention to the insects. Not all of them are the enemies. There's significantly more beneficials than there are enemies. It's beneficial to take care of the enemies if you allow them to do that. Observe the plants and the animals. They can tell you volumes. I know talking with Grant and Dawn, they can tell, they have story after story about how they made adjustments because how their livestock adapted to what they were doing. Closing, regenerative agriculture, I believe, is much more than a conservation practice. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Once you go down the path of regenerative agriculture, you can't turn back. So my question to all of you producers here today, can you be happier, more content, and more profitable working with instead of against Mother Nature, or as our family likes to call it, God's creation, as this creation was originally designed to be cared for? Only you can answer that. Thank you for your kind attention. Be happy to answer questions. I have poor hearing, so you're going to have, that's why I wear these things.
Okay, I do too. But I would like to know a little bit more about how you're getting your cover crop into your corn. Your procedures.
Everybody hear the question? Back up here. There, you see right here. Now, there are other ways. There's lots of different ways to do this. We chose because of the overhead and not wanting to spend a ton of money on some kind of a no-till piece of equipment. So we found a used 515 drill, moved the units over. In fact, I was told by the consulting group we couldn't do this in 30-inch rows, and I'm too stubborn. So we do plant it early. We try to get that interseeded with that drill, and all it is just a simple regular drill. It's not a no-till drill, but we just wanted to get it in the ground, a quarter and half inch, and we try and get this done in V2, V3 early because we need to get it established before you get that canopy. Otherwise, it can damp off if it isn't big enough. But it does survive much better. Just find the earlier we can do it. As soon as the roads are starting to peek through the ground, that's when we establish. But that's how we do it.
You said you haven't used P&K for several years. Where do you think you're getting those nutrients from?
Sunlight, water produces photosynthesis, the root exudates, and the microbiology. Once you understand the relationship of microbiology and plants and how they take care of each other, a suggestion, and that's a person by the name of Dr. Christine Jones. She's from Australia. You can look up YouTube. She's got a phenomenal one, particularly when she spoke in Sioux Falls here a couple of years ago. Explains in detail, and there's a lot of other things in there too, but explains in detail how that microbiology, again, liquid carbon, I'm not going to go into detail, but you make available what's already there. They produce those nutrients and feed the plant.
Hey, Phil. Two questions. Follow up to that one. Have you watched your soil samples since you've stopped applying P&K?
Yeah, those and I didn't bring those with. We do the soil health, the Haney test, and we actually do it, and it's a little costly, but because it's $50 a sample. But we do it on every 40 acres, and we've done it every year since we started, and whether it's corn, soybeans, whatever, because we want to see where those levels are. Our organic matter has actually been increased by 3/4 of a point in this time frame, which is absolutely phenomenal. So yeah, we're watching those. I'd have to show you the tests. Didn't bring them along. I wasn't going to get that specific, but it shows the microbial activity, not only the nutrient value that you have there, but what's available because of the microbial activity that's there. I don't know how else to explain that.
And second question, what's the tile situation on your farm? Is it full pattern tile, or is some tile or no tile?
I'll just say some tile. In some of the lower areas, there's some pattern tile. One farm we farmed for, since I started, just has simple drainage, intakes and no laterals. That's one thing with the infiltration we're seeing. Again, it's hard to describe until you actually see it happen on your farm, but we don't know. We don't have a lot of pattern tile. There are certain areas that we have just simply because we had done it before we'd gotten to this point. Would I still add some? Maybe, but maybe not as much. I hope that answered your question.
Phil, we don't farm that far apart, and yet your cover crops came up and apparently stayed living on those B6 or planted interseeded cover crops. Do you think it's possible that your retention of the soil moisture was why that survived where I live, it all died as the season went on? Or did you get extra rain?
No, it actually got pretty dry. And again, don't expect you to believe me, but I've seen plots and I've seen pictures. I've actually seen one plot in person where in fact, Gabe Brown did a test, and he talks about this often. They had, I think it was 7 or 8 different species of cover crops. They planted in 1 acre increments, single species. And then the last one, they threw them all together in the same one. And they had a record drought that year. I don't remember what year it was, early 2000s. The single species were all dead. The one that had the multi-species was all green. Pretty hard to explain. I don't expect you to believe me, but the synergy, again, it's God's creation working the way it was supposed to work. That's about as simple as I can say it. I'm not, it's a synergy of multi-species, and that's why I believe the corn crop did as well. In fact, I had some pictures, which all they know is I lost a bunch of them through a phone issue, and I had taken some pictures a couple years ago, a soybean field that was right next to the neighbors. They were side by side. They planted almost the same time, but it got pretty dry, really dry. And the maturity of the beans were relatively the same, but right to the line, the neighbors with this heavy tillage was turning that grayish, lime green, yellow because it was drought stressed. Ours were just as beautiful green. It was right to the line. And they had been planted in rye that spring as well. Long answer, but it's a multi-species issue. It's the way God's creation works. I encourage you to look up Dr. Christine Jones. It'll start to make a little sense. If anybody needs that name or if you call me, text me, whatever, I'll send you a link to that and get you started on YouTube. But look up Dr. Christine Jones on YouTube. She does a great job. Simple way of explaining it. I want to hold you away from lunch.
Well, I don't know if lunch is ready. Are you doing lunch ready? The lunch is ready, so if you don't have any more questions, I can give the mic over to Heidi here, and before we turn you loose, hang on 1 second. Thank you, Phil, very much.